This is our last in this series of resilience and strength. So, looking at love, happiness, and peace, it's not necessarily a no brainer that those would go together. There's a lot of different words we could put together there. But I wanted to look at them a little bit as a group. And as we go through, we're going to stop at different slides and kind of look into different aspects of it for ourselves. So, Rick Hansen is a neuropsychologist who does a lot of work on happiness. He's got several books, he's got courses, he has the Well-Being podcast. And I love his work because it's science based, but also he's, I think, 40 some years as a Buddhist meditator and meditation teacher now. And he really works with the practical neuroscience of the brain. He's the one that first started using that phrase, the brain is like Teflon for positive and Velcro for negative. So he talks about the biological negativity bias and how to work with the brain to increase our pathways, the neural pathways for happiness by noticing happiness. So he's talking about these mental resources of determination, self worth, and kindness, and how they lead us to a sense of well being and resilience, and that those things kind of work together. It's so easy. I've been noticing this week as I've been going through the week and noticing what's on social media, Facebook in particular, that there's a lot of negativity out there and a lot of fear, and really directly related to the surge in COVID-19 in the United States, in many, many states and areas in the US. And it can be kind of overwhelming when that's what we're seeing. So between people that are negative towards Trump and people that are really noticing the rise, there's lots of posts about masks right now and how to protect each other, and a lot of shaming. We were talking about shaming earlier. So how can we move through life in these really challenging times? As we're recording this, it's the end of June, and how can we do that with a sense of well-being and resilience and not get lost in the negativity? One thing I thought was really interesting was, and I've seen this referred to before, as the gross national happiness instead of gross national product. And Bhutan has a project over there, and they have for quite a few years. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this slide, but I wanted it to be in the recording of it and in the PDF so you can have a look at it later if you wanted to. And if you were to search through it, you can go and see Jim Drescher, who's with Wind Horse Farm here. I've had some retreats there. He's local in Nova Scotia. He's part of a project that he's doing with some people in Bhutan and at Wind Horse Farm here in Nova Scotia. It's a 9-month project around happiness, which I thought was really interesting, and that's where I got this from. And the thing that interests me about the slide is the many components of it. So we have our psychological well-being, which a lot of people would really kind of hone in on, our physical and mental health. But it also really has to do with cultural diversity and resilience, with good governance. A lot of people are certainly seeing the effect of governance on the police forces and who does what, who gets the power to say what. That sense of community vitality, a lot of communities are not very friendly for people getting to know each other. Certainly, the environment, the ecology, our standard of living, all of these contribute to our sense of well-being and happiness. And so positive and negative emotions and life satisfaction, those kinds of things have a lot of components that go into them. So I would like to stop here for a couple of minutes and feel into this. What does it feel like inside of you? So let's start with that. Maybe we could visualize a time when we felt happy. I put some words here: contentment, joy, pleasure, all of these different words. What would you add to that list? So if you were to just kind of look at that, so you could think of a time when you were contented, or you could think of a time when you had a lot of cheerfulness, or the people around you were joking or laughing or something like that. So let's take a couple of minutes to bring that into the body. What is your experience right now? And visualize it if you have that kind of mind where you can visualize an event. Or kind of sense into that. Who was there? What were you doing? What was being said? What was your experience? Really feel into that. Notice what it feels like, what's happening with your breath. Is your body relaxing? Is there something in the way of kind of really sinking into this? Does it feel kind of charged? Sometimes happiness can feel kind of too intense. Is it relaxed? Just continue to notice what's your direct experience as you're looking into this. And this next screen has a bunch of faces of different emotions that we feel and a list of them. So, one of the things that I wanted to move into over the next few slides is the diversity of our emotions and what we're able to welcome and what we aren't able to welcome. So, there's so many different ways that we can feel. Some of them are more on the positive scale, like happy, peaceful. A lot of them are more on the negative scale of things that we don't want to feel: grief, sadness, anger, confusion. We don't like to feel trapped, afraid, rejected. So a lot of these are probably the ones that come to mind are more on the negative scale. And that might also be how we experience them too. One of my favorite artists, Tina Turner, and one of her songs, What's Love Got to Do with It, has that line, who needs a heart when a heart can be broken? And it just seems so evocative of a lot of my experience, I think, and a lot of us. We are pretty protective of our hearts after they've been broken a few times. And there's an ongoing practice to keep our hearts open. And that can be when we're scrolling through social media feeds and we get kind of hard hearted about some of what we see there. And certainly it's related to our personal lives. How much do we protect our hearts? So, some of the questions on here are from Pete Walker's book, The Tao of Fully Feeling. And he talks about emotional perfectionism and the direction that we often go to eliminate unpleasant feelings. So let's sit with this for maybe a minute or so. So his questions are: is happiness a cure for emotional pain? Can we transcend suffering permanently, like becoming enlightened, only feeling the oneness of everyone? Is that enough to protect us from unpleasant feelings? And is it even a good idea? So, if you were to just kind of sit with that for a moment, notice your body and breathe into that. What does the heart know about this? Is it possible or advisable to eliminate unpleasant feelings? This is a quote from Pete Walker from that book. So it's the Tao of fully feeling, harvesting forgiveness out of blame, which is an interesting subtitle too. But one of the things that really stood out for me was this quote: the greatest turning point in my life was supplanting my permanent quest for happiness and transcendence with a stubborn willingness to be there for myself in every feeling state. And if you've seen his books, this one and Complex PTSD from Surviving to Thriving, he really does go into the importance and the healing transformational practices of being present with what's here for all of the range that we experience. Last week we worked a little bit with clean pain and dirty pain, or maybe it was the week before, on facing what we don't want to face, what we avoid, and how we need to move into this. We need to choose integrity over fear. We need to find the best parts of ourselves. We make that leap into somehow trusting that this is going to work out, that it will be okay, that we have the capacity to feel what's here and to face what we don't want to face, and that that's actually going to be better than avoiding it. And it's not, again, to say that we need to be perfect about this, that we're always going to be completely open to what we feel, because I don't think that's really, certainly that's not my own personal experience. There's lots of times when I want to take a break from it. I suspect that's the case for most of us. So then where does that leave us? If we're looking at, we want to be happy, we want to enjoy our life, we want to feel peace, be able to love and accept love, feel love for ourselves and others, that somehow we need to be able to accept and experience that full range of human feelings. So if you were to just think about this for a minute or feel into that, without your darker emotions, without expressing sorrow or some kind of angst, or without that, without feeling them, and then without connecting with others around that, what would our life be like? And he talks about the depth and dimensionality in our connection with others is due to our darker emotions, due to letting ourselves really feel and share that. And the profound loneliness when we only relate to others from that I'm okay, because we're not really sharing who we are. So if you could imagine, even think back over the last little while when you shared something that was hard or difficult, or when someone shared something with you. And we do that all the time here too. That's part of what gives us depth and dimensionality in our connection with each other. And it always comes back to this being our own friend, being on our own side. He's saying that someone who can do that when we're feeling emotional pain, we end up with a more solid and authentic self esteem. And I would say that that's because we're real with ourselves, we're not pretending. So if you couldn't handle feeling jealousy, for instance, for somebody, and so you pushed it away, and that's a lot of what shadow work is about, is we push it away and put it on someone else. But if we can actually just open to that and go, well, right now that's what I'm feeling. And then how could we work with that? And over and over again, we come back to not shaming ourselves. So let's stay here now for a little bit and feel into the answers that we might have, or the thoughts we might have around this question of how we define happiness. Is it only found in the absence of something that's troubling or uncomfortable? Is it possible to be happy even in moments of grief or sadness? Or what's your experience with that? It has a lot to do with how we define happiness. Feel into that in your body. Notice your breath. And what about when you do hard things? So, one example we've been looking at a lot over the last several weeks is anti racist work. And I know that as I've been taking seminars and workshops and reading and listening and engaging with podcasts and talking about it with other people, it's really uncomfortable a lot of the time. And I'm really aware of a lot of what those words are around that, like, well, you have the white privilege to back away from this. If it's getting to be too much for you, you could just stop engaging in it. And so some of that is really uncomfortable to look at and see my own patterns. And I consider myself someone who's pretty engaged in it. And still, how does all that work? And so, how does happiness, peace, and joy, how do those interact with having a meaningful life, a life of being able to do hard things? And not just with that grit your teeth, tighten your shoulders, and get through it, but to relax and move through it with some confidence and not to shame ourselves. So let's take a moment to sit with that and think back to some hard things that you've done. We've all done hard things. And notice what kind of environment there is in your mind as you're thinking about that. Did you do that thing with kind of that gritted teeth? If you were to do it again, would it be possible to do it in a little bit different way? One of the hardest things we can do is facing the truth, being truthful with ourselves. And part of the reason it's so hard to do that is because of shaming. Really notice your body, your breath. Let your shoulders relax, your gut. your forehead, your jaw. And circling back to Rick Hansen, he has his latest book is Neurodharma, New Science, Ancient Wisdom, and Seven Practices of the Highest Happiness. And he also has an online course of the same name, Neurodharma. And the reason that I'm quoting him from here is he's talking about life satisfaction in a way. Like when we don't make our full contribution, it builds up this ache in our heart. And just as someone was talking earlier about the predictability and the structure of having these daily practices, what was going through my mind was, what if I didn't have these daily practices? We've been doing these for almost 5 years, and it's created such a wonderful structure for sure, but also a time to really come in and do practice together. And what would my life be like without doing that? And so this is one of the ways, and I really noticed at the beginning of COVID, was that this is one of the ways that I can really help and be of service, is that I can do these practices. I've been doing interviews with people. And when we know that there's something more we can do and we're not doing it, it's not very satisfying. And a lot of it is the nervous system. We're in fear. We might have a lot of inner critic stuff going on. One of the things that really holds us back is being engaged with an activity, hoping for a certain outcome. And so, how can we work with kind of this whatever we could offer in a way that's not stressful, that it's not driven? And how can we bring this into our life? Let's take a moment there to see what comes up for you. So, as you're thinking about that for yourself. And this is something that is more than a couple of minutes inquiry. This is something would be very helpful to really sit with over the upcoming days. What is it that I could offer? And he's asking, how can I be ambitious, passionate, motivated, and effective without getting stressed, driven, tense, or tired along the way? How could we move into this more satisfying life, making more of a contribution, or however that might come for you? And that can really be a range of things. How can we offer ourselves in service to the world? And one of the ways that we do that is to stay grounded in the body, being aware of our sensations of breathing, and noticing what it feels like. Just to think back to a few minutes ago when we were looking around the Zoom room at people's pictures and their names, and some of the people are very familiar if we've been doing this for a long time. And it might be a newer community to us, but we still feel welcome. And sometimes what people are expressing is difficult, and yet we're able to feel really connected. Part of that is by not leaving our body, by really staying present. So, this is the last kind of inquiry. We'll take a couple of minutes for this. I allow a full range of emotions and feelings. I love myself as I am, and I am at peace. So whichever one of those sentences is interesting to you right now, let's take a couple of minutes with that. No shame. It might be more of an aspiration than a reality, something we're working towards. Connect with your heart. You could put your hand on your heart if you wanted. What does your heart know about this? And then when you're ready, let's come back.